Did SGA just lock up the MVP race last night, or can Nikola Jokic shift the tide in their upcoming head-to-head matchups? Top teams flex their muscles, including the Boston Celtics. Two Celtics do something that's never been done in the green and white. And I asked Matt and Hayes, what's the worst team by record right now that they think could get to an NBA Finals? That's all today on a stacked edition of Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are free. We are available wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm Doug Branson, host of Locked On Hornets, and your shot clock Sherpa, guiding you through the NBA's biggest stories with the help of Locked On's local experts. And we've got a lot of big stories to get to in this episode. But first, I have to introduce you to two of Locked On's premier national NBA experts from the Locked On Nuggets podcast and senior NBA writer for the Action Network. He's the man of 1,000 podcasts. It's Matt Moore.
If you ever want to watch an absolutely drunk basketball game, just go back and watch Nuggets Kings last night, because that thing didn't just need its keys taken. It passed out on the lawn.
I loved on the Locked On NBA game night hearing your full breakdown of just how drunk that game was. So if you want to hear Matt's full breakdown of that, go and check out the Locked On NBA game night edition on this feed, by the way, recapping every game every night. From the Locked On Bulls podcast, we have our Prince of Petty. It's Hayes.
I have been one of the last people holding out hope that the Memphis Grizzlies could still be taken seriously as a contender. I am no longer on that bandwagon at all. So
they lose to the Oklahoma City Thunder, but they were not alone. The Thunder, Cavaliers, and Boston Celtics all flexed their muscles in their own unique ways last night. We're going to get to all three teams, but let's begin with the Thunder, who imposed their will on the aforementioned Memphis Grizzlies late in a 120-103 victory, led by another fourth quarter takeover by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who Locked On Thunder seemed to think may have wrapped up the MVP race already.
I think it's one of the most interesting races we've ever had in the NBA. I think if you vote for Jokic, it's not a bad vote. It's not a vote worthy of criticism. I think it would be a vote that changed the NBA, because we've never just kind of handed the MVP trophy to the best player in the league over and over and over again. If you do that, how are you ever going to stop voting for Jokic? Because he's going to do these same things next year. Whereas Shai, this guy is an all-time great scorer. This guy has brought the Thunder to a record here where they're 11 games up on the number 2 seed. They've been the only constant in the Western Conference, and that's because of SGA, because of his availability every game, because of his production every game, and because of games like this where he came in the fourth quarter after a Memphis 7-0 run and he took it over.
He plays two ways. He plays defense and offense. He's elite both ways. And, Jokic is, let's be generous and say he's a neutral defender. Are you telling me that 4 more assists and 7 more rebounds covers up all the difference in the standings and the win-loss record? Shai's the MVP. He's just the MVP.
Matt, does SGA have the MVP race wrapped up, or does Nikola Jokic have a chance to turn the tide in their upcoming head-to-head matchups?
First off, I'll say that it should not be about the head-to-head matchups, and it will impact things. If Jokic takes both of them, that changes the equation. If Shai takes both of them, it's done. It should not be this way. That's ridiculous and very stupid and a horrible way to evaluate 82 games of play, but this is how we operate a lot of the time. Thunder are on pace for between 67 68 wins. Nuggets are on pace for currently about 53. I think if the gap shortens to somewhere under 65 for Thunder and it gets to 55 plus for Denver, the conversation gets pretty dicey. He does have to win those 2 matchups versus Shai. Again, I don't think he should have to, but he's going to have to win those 2 matchups versus Shai. I continue to believe that when the voters get to the end of the season, they just look at the overall contributions, and Locked On Thunder I thought did a terrible job there. Really, is it just 4 more assists and 9 more rebounds on better It's like on better efficiency, and the impact numbers are way better on offense, and Shai's like the 4th best defender of the team. I'm not caping for my guy. I'm not a Nuggets fan. I'm just telling you that if you look at the candidacies, these are very, 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 very close. Shai's been amazing. He's totally deserving of the MVP award. But I do think this is, and usually I say this should be done sooner. In this instance, I think, Hayes, you got to wait to the end of the season to make sure you have all the information before you vote.
Yeah, I mean, Jokic still absolutely has a chance to win MVP. I don't know how what the odds on that chance is, but I do think Shai is the odds-on betting favorite right now to win the MVP for a lot of different reasons, right? Narrative plays a part into it. As much as we can talk about if it should or should not, it does play a part into the MVP voting. And I think when you look at it on top of it, like we talked about, there is some voter fatigue. Do I agree with voter fatigue? No, because I think if Jokic is having an amazing season, he's the best player in the league and does the most for his team, he should win it regardless of how many times he won it in the past, if he's qualified. But Shai is doing this on a team that has now the 2nd best differential. He's been consistent. He's an amazing scorer. He steps up defensively absolutely when that team needs it. And honestly, Shai should have been in MVP voting in years prior, higher into consideration. So this is Shai's year to win it, but you can't call it yet because Jokic still has a chance.
Right now, our friends at FanDuel have SGA at -600, Nikola Jokic at +380. Let's move over to the Eastern Conference. The Cavaliers escaped a defeat against Miami to keep their winning streak alive. We'll get to them coming up in the next segment, but we have to talk about the Boston Celtics and the insane box score lines from 2 Celtics with names that do not start with a J. John Corrales, host of Locked On Celtics, whose name does start with a J, has the details.
No Kristaps Porzingis, no Drew Holiday. That is a recipe for a tight game at the very best. But the Celtics get Payton Pritchard just going ballistic. Derrick White having a monster shooting night. The first 2 Celtics teammates ever to score 40 in a game together. It's hard to believe that that's never happened before. All of the great teammates that have been together to have 2 guys score 40 in the same game. Never before this game. Obviously, the 3-pointer changes the entire calculus of this, and the fact that they hit 19 together. No NBA teammates ever have done that. Not Stephen Clay, not any. No 2 players have combined for 19 3-pointers. I mean, that's more than the Celtics on their own as a team average. And these 2 guys went out there and hit 19 of them.
So John would go on in this episode to make the argument that the Boston Celtics really needed this game in a boringly good season, for lack of a better phrase. Players scoring 40 or more points. It was fun. It was buzzy. Do you agree with that argument, Hayes? Did the Celtics was this cathartic for them? Did they need multiple players to score 40 or more to kind of get their season back moving in a championship direction?
No. Come on. It's a great story, but to say that they needed that to get their season go, come on. And I feel for John Corrales. His team is so good. I would love to be in a position where your team's so good as you have to try to find your angle every single night. But to say that, it breached for a close game against the Portland Trailblazers? Come on. But it was an amazing performance to see what Derrick White and Payton Pritchard were able to do. But I don't think this is the win you're looking at and saying, thank God we got this win. We're back on our championship run now. No, come on now. What are we doing?
Why you got to do that to my Blazers?
if you Blazers have played some good defense this year, so maybe that's the upside here. Is they did it versus this really good defense, the Portland Trailblazers, who are competing for so much. If you leave Derrick White and Payton Pritchard open, they're going to knock down threes. Cool, thanks. That's amazing. I'm so surprised. I can't believe it. No, honestly, this is a little disappointing for me. Little disappointing. You want to know why? San Antonio Spurs, when they had this level of success, didn't need stuff like this. Didn't need to force feed these cute little narrative stories. Look at Payton Pritchard, he scored 40. Didn't need to do any of that. They just won out there and won games professionally. And then they did not need to indulge in this kind of nonsense. Quit making Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, who have not been great this season, into some huge missing component here. They have more than enough to win this game versus the Portland Trailblazers. As good as the Blazers have been defensively, not a serious team. Celtics fans get to be excited about it. If you're a Celtics fan and you're listening to this and you're like, rah, 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 you get to be excited about it because you're a fan. Everybody's awesome. Payton Pritchard is a future superstar, blah, blah, blah. For the rest of us, like, let's just keep it moving, Doug.
Oh, but this means nothing to you? I mean, this means the getting this kind of performance. Nothing.
Zero.
All right.
It is you want to know why? Because the 40 plus thing has never been done by any player in NBA history. And so if two teammates that were legitimately like huge level stars, if the Jays had done it, I'd be like, look, this is a testament to how good those two guys can be on their own. That for as good as that supporting structure is, it's proof. This is a trivia question. This is going to be Sully drunk like that Kings Nuggets game last night on a Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. in Boston going, Payton Pritchard and Derrick White as he falls off the stool. That's what this is going to be.
Let us know what you think, and I have a feeling that several people will. In the comments on YouTube, youtube.com/LockedOnNBA, where we do read them, and we do read them on the show sometimes. So definitely let us know what you think. More to come. More to come here on Locked On NBA. We've talked a lot about the contenders. Later in the show, I'm going to ask Matt and Hayes which team with the worst record could actually make an NBA Finals this season. Plus, Giannis Antetokounmpo, he set some history of his own. We've got all of that, and we raise some eyebrows coming up on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by BetterHelp. Who's in your support system? We all need people to lean on. The Boston Celtics, they needed Payton Pritchard and Derrick White to lean on. Some of us need friends, families, mentors, but even the strongest leaders and athletes know that asking for help makes them better. Therapy is one of the best ways to build that support system. It's not just for tough times. It helps you set boundaries, develop coping skills, and become the best version of yourself. I've seen firsthand how valuable it is to have that kind of support, whether it's for managing stress, working through challenges, or just improving every single day. And with BetterHelp, it's easier than ever. Their online platform connects you with over 30,000 licensed therapists so that you can find the right fit and switch anytime at no extra cost. Build your support system with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free and daily newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com, subscribe, stay up to date with local expert analysis, and you get amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. The Cleveland Cavaliers needed a 12-2 run in the final 4 minutes of last night's game against the Miami Heat to secure their 12th straight win. They become only the second team in NBA history with 3 winning streaks of 12 or longer, joining the 2006 and 2007 Dallas Mavericks. But it wasn't all sunshine in rainbows for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Let's go to Danny Cunningham from Locked On Cavaliers for more.
One thing that I don't know if it's right to be concerned about, we're probably not at that point. Maybe it's worth lifting an eyebrow, like just one eyebrow at it, is the play of Darius Garland lately. So I didn't think he was great against Miami on Wednesday. I thought he was okay. I didn't think he was great. And since that injury that he endured against the New York Knicks a couple of weeks ago, he hasn't been at his best. He hit 5 threes against the Bulls, but otherwise had a pretty inefficient night. He was 5 of 12, did hit 3 threes against Miami, had 10 assists, which 6 of them, I believe, came in the fourth quarter. Like, he had a really nice fourth quarter to help lead this team to victory. But overall, and Kenny Atkinson spoke after the game about there's been some slippage with starters, and I think that was Darius Garland that he was talking about. But the Cavs, the beauty of this Cavs team is they have guys that step up and pick up that slack. Not the biggest deal in the world, but it is something I think to at least raise an eyebrow.
Oh, I love a good eyebrow raise. Oh, Matt, that's a great eyebrow raise. Hayes, you got a good one? Oh, yeah. We're going to have to talk to Danny. I saw him try to attempt the eyebrow raise there. Maybe he caught himself off guard. I'm going to talk to him. We'll see if we can get that eyebrow stretched out. Hayes, Does Darius Garland's struggles recently raise your eyebrow, or is it a serious concern to monitor as the Cavs try to avoid the same fate as the 06-07 Mavericks, which was a first-round exit to the 8th seed Golden State Warriors?
I mean, yeah, I could say that it's something to monitor. I don't think it should be a serious concern right now. I mean, he's still scoring at a really good rate, solid efficiency. Last 3 games is 32%. But I think you want to watch it because if it is something, you have more than enough talent to get him some rest if need be. So watch it in that, because you cannot let anything derail what your goal is this season. Your goal is a title, not the win record, not anything like that. Your goal is a title. So if it continues to look like he's hampered by a bit of an injury, then yeah, you make a decision there. But I'm not gonna overreact to it right now.
Hey, we're back to talk about serious basketball instead of kitty fun ball. I think Garland is going to face some questions because of his playoff performances have been rough. Both years that he's made a playoff run, he's been the guy that struggled the most. The first year it was Evan Mobley and him. Last year, Evan Mobley kind of moved past those struggles and was really good in the playoffs, and Garland still struggled. Small guards struggle in the playoffs. So I think there is going to be kind of this kind of warning sign. In the Tuesday game, this was a back-to-back. In the Tuesday game, he started off and he was absolutely horrible from the field, but then he caught fire in the fourth quarter and helped deliver that win to the point where Donovan Mitchell didn't need to come back into the game. So Garland can move past these things and have these really good stretches. But I do think we have to keep an eye out because, like, look, the NBA playoffs are about matchups. They're about talent. They're about all these things. They're also about attrition. You have to have your guys in position to be their best version of themselves. And whatever the Cavs have to do to get Darius Garland there, they've got to, because he's too important for them.
There were a couple of other stories around the NBA landscape that raised my eyebrow. I'm curious if it raised Matt and Hayes' eyebrow. Let's start in Los Angeles. The Lakers owner, Jeanie Buss, had some interesting comments in an interview on NPR's Morning Edition on Anthony Davis's role in the trade that sent him to Dallas. She said this, quote, Anthony Davis was complaining about where he was being played and he wasn't happy. So I think this was a positive for both teams. She's referencing in part an interview that Davis gave to Shams Charania of ESPN in which he said the Lakers needed center help so that he could play the 4. Did AD talk his way out of LA? Here's Andy Kamenetsky of Locked On Lakers with his take.
There's a point where after hearing this over and over from AD, I don't blame the front office if their reaction is to quote Don Draper, that's what the money's for. Like, we get it. You want to play power forward. It's not doable. Asked, answered, with all sincere respect and appreciation, shut the F up. Like, what do you want us to do about this? Do you really want us to make decisions for the roster that we don't think are in our best interest, your best interest, that don't really work within the cap, like with the way resources would be allocated? Like, what do you want us to do? So in that sense, I do think AD played a role in chipping away at the Lakers' confidence in his viability moving forward, even if they never, I think, doubted his talent.
All right, Matt, when you read these comments from Jeanie Buss, did they raise your eyebrow?
Yeah, a little bit. I would say that they did. Like, and the reason is there's a lot of reasons that have to go into like the dynamics between Clutch Sports and the front office that I think are worthy of a book in and of themselves. But I'll also just like put it this way. I made Celtics fans earlier, so let's switch it up and make Lakers fans mad. Anthony Davis wasn't worth it. Wasn't worth all that. Well, wasn't worth the constant complaining. AD wanted to play power forward because when he matched up against bigs with physicality, did not work out great for him. All of a sudden, the most dominant defensive player of the year was really kind of ineffective. The Lakers defense numbers prove that. He likes to dunk on smaller guys, that you can't always just play smaller teams. And so Anthony Davis wanted to never have to do the hard stuff, which if you're going to be the face of the franchise going forward for the next 10 years, you have to do the hard stuff. The Lakers realize that. Luka Doncic, willing to do the hard stuff as long as it's not cardio. So I think by all means, this was a great trade, and it makes a lot of sense that the Lakers moved on.
I I get it. And yes, AD has wanted to play 4. We've known that almost since he came to LA, right? We've known that he prefers to play the 4. And I do think had this Luka opportunity not fallen in their lap, I do think they probably would have went out and got him center help. That Mark Williams trade may still happen. Maybe the Walker Kessler trade would have happened. And I think they would have tried to do their best to go out there and find it. Because I think that's also in the best interest for the team. If you move AD to the 4, I think it would have been best. So yeah, him going to Dallas where he's able to play the 4, he has 2 defensive centers there. It is, I think, what's best for him in the way that he wants to play basketball. Now, as far as winning, that's up to the Mavericks to figure out. But yeah, it made me raise an eyebrow a little bit. But it's like I feel like this has been something that's been known for like 3 years now. AD does not like playing the 5. He wants to be a 4, despite his size, the length, the wingspan, all that. He wants to play the 4. Okay, so be it.
Talking bad about the Blazers. You now mentioned the Mark Williams trade. I'm going to stop raising eyebrows. I'm going to start raising hands pretty soon.
We haven't even gotten to the Clippers.
Hey, speaking of, coming up, something that happened with the LA Clippers raised my eyebrow. I'll tell you what that is and get Matt and Hayes' take. Plus, what's the worst team by record right now that Matt and Hayes think still could make an NBA Finals? That's all ahead on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, live bets can be placed throughout the game. If you missed the opening tip-off, want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. Looking for a bigger payout? Combine live bets into a same-game parlay. We mentioned the regular season MVP odds. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander still the favorite at -600 right now. Stephon Castle, the favorite for NBA Rookie of the Year at -240, and Evan Mobley at -210 for Defensive Player of the Year. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for a shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. One more eyebrow raiser. This at least raised my eyebrow. James Harden scoring 50 points, 16 of 20 from the free throw line, getting everyone some DoorDash deals. How many eyebrows are raised by this vintage Harden performance that I will say contextually happens during a time when the Clippers were starting to slip a little bit? Harden raising his game. Hayes, you're a noted Clippers hater. Did this raise your eyebrow at all?
No, if it was in the playoffs, maybe. I mean, shout out to him scoring 50 points. I said it the other day, 50 points is 50 points as long as it's not against the Hawks and the Wizards. So great performance by James Harden there, all jokes aside. But, I mean, we know that the Clippers are a good regular season team. I think the biggest question in front of them is, can they be healthy and can they be good enough in the playoffs? Until that, nothing's raising my eyebrow with the Clippers.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good win, right? The Detroit Pistons have been so red hot. So this is a really quality win, even at home at the Wall. I think when I watch the Clippers lately, one of the things I've really kind of noticed is Harden's going through a lot of muscle memory. If you kind of watch him, he's going to the exact same sequences that he kind of always does, just kind of going through the motions. I'm going to come off the pick and roll. All right, they dropped him, I shoot a floater. Oh, they came up, I'm going to throw the lob, like over and over and over again. And this is kind of proof. I think this happens to a lot of players in their careers and they've played so many games. It is just kind of like you're just going through the motions and there's no real artistry or creation being happening. Last night, he was a lot more creative. I think this shows what it's capable of when he really gets into that kind of a zone. Now, I agree with Hayes. We're going to have to see it in the playoff versus a playoff viable defense. But this was, I think, a really good win and a reminder that when Harden gets out of his routines, there really is a genius in there.
So we've done a lot of talking in this episode about the top contenders, but Matt, I was reading your Substack, Hardwood Paroxysm, and you did a deep dive on the Indiana Pacers, and you've spoken glowingly of them on this show, which got me curious about the worst teams by record that you think could make an NBA Finals. Not necessarily win one, but could make an NBA Finals this season. Matt, is Indiana your pick?
Yeah. So I look at the board. I'm always looking at the board for who's got a path. And one of the things that's really interesting is Indiana, the whole thing was elite offense, defense is wretched, terrible, awful. First 2 months of the season, they were bottom 5. They're ninth since January 1st. We're talking about over 2 months of play. They've got a top 10 defense. Halliburton, we talked about him on the show, has really come on, and now he's back to looking like himself. The Celtics have talked about how much they did not enjoy that matchup. They swept them, right? That was the best version of the Boston Celtics. This is not that version. And this is probably a better version, I think, of the Indiana Pacers. So that's like a really interesting matchup. Cavs are taking care of business versus them. That's strength versus strength with offense versus offense. And the Cavs defense is about where the Pacers are since January 1. They're there for the whole season. But I just think the dynamics are really interesting. And I'll tell you one team that does not want to see Indiana, and that's the New York Knicks. The Pacers, given all of their history, I can see them sending New York home early again if that's the 3-6 matchup. I really do think Indiana has the ability to make a surprise run to the conference finals if a few things go their way.
It was really early in the season, but the Indiana Pacers also gave the Boston Celtics some trouble as well. Hayes, your thoughts on the Pacers, and what's your pick for a team with the worst record that can make an NBA Finals?
I definitely think that the Pacers have a chance to make some noise there in the Eastern Conference. They are so good offensively, and when Tyrese Halliburton is playing well, it's a completely different outlook of that team. So I do think that the Pacers can make some noise in the Eastern Conference. That's not going to be my pick, though. My pick is going to be. Am I a prisoner of the moment a little bit? Probably. But I do think I have some things to back it up. I'm going to say the Golden State Warriors, despite everything that's going on in the Western Conference. In the last 20 games, they're 5th in net rating, 7th in offensive rating, 5th in defensive rating. The way that Jimmy Butler, a motivated Jimmy Butler, is a dangerous player. And I know he's not going to come up against the Bucks in the playoffs, but I think if you get Jimmy Butler playing the way that we've seen him in some of those playoff runs, being healthy before, you pair that with the motivated Dre and Steph, and how this bench can play at times, I'm not going to pick them to make the finals, but if you're talking about the lowest seed that just has the chance to make it, I think that the Golden State Warriors can make it very interesting if they can keep up that level of play, which is its own question, but I will pick the Golden State Warriors here.
Man, the core and coach that won 4 titles and added Jimmy Butler. Next, you're going to tell me you think Payton Pritchard can put up 40 on a lottery team. Amazing. Way to go out on the limb there, Hayes.
He said the lowest seed. That's the lowest seed.
I know, and it beats the Pacers. I mean, it did different conferences, obviously, but it does beat the Pacers by a solid 2 games. Right now, the Golden State Warriors 34-28, the Indiana Pacers 35-25. Let us know what you think. Lowest or worst record that could win an NBA or could make an NBA Finals. Let us know on YouTube, youtube.com/@LockedOnNBA. All right, final thing here on this edition of Locked On NBA. The Celtics bench wrenches, not the only players making NBA history last night or franchise history. Giannis Antetokounmpo eclipsed 20,000 points. Only a few have done it faster. Locked On Bucks says it's high time we consider Giannis an elite scorer.
Nobody ever talks about Giannis as like just a bucket getter, elite scorer. And then you look at these numbers and it's just like,
he's one of them.
So shout out to Giannis for being incredibly skilled, physically talented, sure. But, you know, as we always say, there's been tons of guys who have a ton of, you know, who can run and jump and are really tall. But there's never been anybody like Giannis. You know, the best ball handling 7-footer in the history of the sport. Certainly the best big. I'll say this, like, if you want to say KD is fine, okay, you found one guy who's sort of a 7-footer, right? But like, don't come out with like KG or some of these guys. Like KG was not dribbling up and down the floor playing point guard the way Giannis was. Like GTFO.
GTFO. Hayes, are we shortchanging Giannis a little bit as an elite scorer?
Yes. Women lie, men lie. Sometimes numbers do lie, contrary to belief. Records don't lie. Giannis is absolutely should be talked about more as a scorer.
Why are we slandering KG? He definitely brought the ball up sometimes. Anyway, biggest thing for me here, you know, I think Giannis is elite just because of his ability. I've called him the most dominant of this era. Like, he is the most dominant. You can't stop him from getting to the rim unless you just layer your defense at 4 levels to stop him. And that to me is always so impressive. The spin moves, the touch around the rim, everything. 45% from mid-range this season. Keep a real close eye on that going into the playoffs. When he shoots like that, they are a different weapon in the playoffs, and I'm very interested to see if it holds up once we get to the postseason.
So I mentioned that only a few players have done it faster. LeBron James, one of those players. LeBron James just eclipsed his own milestone, 50,000 points, which has me thinking, like, how do you see Giannis's game and his role evolving as he gets older? Do you see some of the physical gifts slipping to the point where it makes it more difficult for him to score at this level? What do you think about that, Matt?
I wonder if he becomes more of a center, right? He becomes more of a pick and roll weapon, a small ball center option for you to be able to play him in the post. If this mid-range jumper continues to develop, if he can get some consistency with it and he can hit little short middies in the lane, that I think fundamentally changes how you can play him. I think his footwork is going to continue to improve. So, whoever he plays with down the line and wherever he plays, I think you're going to have opportunities to shift him to less of a omega 3 and more into more of a pick and roll weapon post up center option as his career evolves.
That's a great point, Hayes. I want your thoughts on that. Plus, what's the window for the Bucks to contend with him as their best player? Like, how many years of this level of Giannis production do they have left?
As far as the getting closer to the basket, like you see, as players get older, they get closer to the basket, they develop some post moves. If Giannis can do that, that's going to open up a whole new thing for him. As far as how many more years under Giannis will they have to contend? He's 30 now. I'll say 3 more. I'll give it 3.
I mean, the answer is just, however long it takes for Payton Pritchard to reach his prime, and then it's over.
Oh, God. It's what you had to get. See, the Dallas Mavericks, the Locked On Mavericks podcast, they call Isaac Harris on that show the One More Thing King. But Matt Moore might be trying to take his crowd here, the one more shot at the Celtics king.
East favorites are very good. Just let's be serious. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, if you like what you heard today, seriously, subscribe to Locked On NBA wherever you get podcasts, including on YouTube. Thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Enjoy tonight's action. Be kind to each other. Check out Locked On NBA Game Night to get recaps of tonight's action. And we're going to see you right back here tomorrow for more analysis on Locked On NBA.